Hello and welcome to the Libre podcast. There's been a lot of interesting things going on since the last episode. Some of the most entertaining have been the absolute debacles going on in the world of social media. It seems like pretty much every platform has just become a totally different thing from what it was a couple of months ago. So, of course, Reddit just continues to burn itself to the ground. I mean, it seems like every single change that they've been implementing since they announced their IPO, or definitely since they started charging money for the API, which is the whole reason, the IPO is the whole reason why they started doing that. They're trying to go public, they're trying to make the company more valuable. So they're like, hey, why don't we start getting some money from our API instead of just letting everyone pretty much use it for free, or at least letting the limits be so high that a whole bunch of different third-party apps can effectively use it for free. But that change and the killing of third-party apps have really made a lot of people just choose to leave the platform, because the official Reddit app kind of sucks, and that's the whole point. You know, Reddit wants people to use that official app and look at all the ads that are in there and so on. But a lot of people have just jumped ship and they've started going to Lemmy, or they've started going to other social media sites. I mean, just that change alone, the killing off third-party apps, I think has doubled or possibly even tripled or more the amount of people that are in the Lemmy-verse. I mean, it's kind of hard to measure because, you know, it's federated. There's all those different Lemmy instances that people can sign up to instead of just one central Lemmy. But I think some of the bigger ones have definitely seen their membership double or triple since that change that Reddit made. And that's not even the change that has pissed Redditors off the most. There was the change to, well, the NSFW change, I think, was they were making it so that you had to log in to view NSFW sites or something like that. That made a lot of people upset because it's, you know, I guess you would want to keep that private, right? You maybe don't necessarily want to have an account, or maybe people just use throwaway accounts for that. I don't know. But I think the biggest change so far that has pissed Redditors off the most has been the removal of the reward system on Reddit. And that's the one that confuses me the most too, because my understanding was all of these rewards that people give to each other, and definitely like the gold and silver and platinum, that's basically credits within Reddit that people are paying money for. So Reddit makes money off of that stuff. I mean, I guess it wasn't a whole lot because they got rid of it. You know, I'd imagine that if this was a real cash cow, they would probably have kept it alive. But the reward system on Reddit, in my opinion, is the main thing that made it different from other social media sites. Like Twitter doesn't have that. Facebook, I don't think has that. I haven't used Facebook in so long. But I don't know any other social media site that really has that reward system. And so without that thing that makes it unique, it just becomes, I don't know, another Twitter clone or another Dig clone, which really that's what Reddit started off as anyway. So yeah, I think these changes, one thing that this has definitely done, like one of the social media, like kind of higher, I guess like higher view social media changes, has been the most hated social media CEO, or probably just the most hated big tech CEO, is now Reddit's CEO. Like, I think if you poll people, you're like, hey, who do you hate more? I forget, I don't even know his name off the top of my head, but Reddit CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, or Elon Musk. They're probably going to start saying Spez. I think that's like his username on Reddit. So yeah, that's a dynamic shift that I'm pretty sure the Zuck and the Musk are really happy about. They've now become cooler, right? All the negativity, all this stuff where people are like, God, I hate those guys so much. It's now being redirected onto Reddit's CEO, which is really handy since, well, Elon Musk and the Zuck are making way bigger moves than whatever Reddit is doing. I mean, they're on a whole other level. So the most entertaining thing, right? This is actually where I think Elon Musk messed up a little bit. So about a month ago, before the launch of Threads, I think Mark Zuckerberg went on some like radio show or some interview where he was talking about Threads, but I don't even think it had a name yet. It was some like Project 513 or some weird thing like that. And he was talking about how it was going to be like a sane alternative to Twitter or something like that, because, you know, obviously Twitter has become a kind of a different thing since Elon Musk took over, and it's really going to become a different thing. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, he's like, yeah, this is going to be the new quote unquote sane alternative to Twitter. So all the people that are like pissed off and hate Twitter now, but you want to keep using Twitter, just come over to Threads or Project 5 or whatever it was. And then Elon Musk went on Twitter and he's like, oh yeah, want to fight about it? Literally. Like, I think, let me see what the tweet says. Yeah, so Elon Musk is like, I'm up for a cage match if he is, LOL. Like, they're taking shots at each other, but he's like, yeah, let's literally take shots at each other in a cage match, right? Let's do it, brother. Well, there's a bit of a problem with that. The the Zuck is probably not a guy that you would want to fight. Okay, I'll say this straight up: I don't want to fight the Zuck. I don't want to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the Zuck, because here's the thing, right? When most of us picture Mark Zuckerberg, you're probably thinking of this skinny, nerdy kid, like kind of autistic, or what is he? He has like Asperger's or something like that. You know, weird, skinny kid who wicked smart, invented Facebook, blah, blah, blah. You don't think of him as tough. You don't think of him as imposing or scary. Or maybe you think of him as like the lizard man, like the meme from a few years ago when he went to testify before Congress. But again, you still don't think of him as really tough, imposing, or scary, at least not if he met you in a dark alley or something like that. But think of the even more recent pictures of Mark Zuckerberg, okay? Like, think of the picture of him on that jet ski, right? Now, I know he looked really weird in it because his whole face is covered in sunscreen. You know, he's doing like white face basically. But look, he's a pasty Jewish kid who's on a not on a sunscreen, on a jet ski. Okay, he needs the sunscreen so that he doesn't get burned. All right, and also that face he's making is probably the face that anybody would make if the paparazzi followed you out into the freaking ocean, okay? Like, that's because that's what happened, right? Or somebody took a picture of this guy, somebody who had a really good camera and probably a pretty good lens, so that's why I assume it's paparazzi, out in the ocean. Like, you think a guy can go out there and jet ski with a bunch of sunscreen on his face and not have paparazzi take a picture of you. But anyway, once you're done laughing at his face, look at his body. And it's not really anything to laugh at, because for one, I mean, I think he's wearing like a wetsuit, or he's wearing something that, you know, fits tight to your body, not something you would want to wear if you're out of shape. Actually, I just looked up the photo. I was misremembering it. It actually doesn't fit that tight to his body, but still, you can tell that he's in shape, right? Like, he looks like a guy that could run a few miles, like probably even a marathon. He looks like he's been in the gym lifting weights, but more importantly than him being in shape as far as the whole fighting thing goes, Mark Zuckerberg has been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdowns. And you know, now that I think about it, it kind of makes sense that that whole metaverse nonsense was going on for like a year and a half, because he just wasn't paying attention to it. He was fighting people, maybe had a concussion, like maybe he literally hit his head while he was rolling with someone and he actually thought that it was a good idea to do that. Like, now it makes sense. This guy has been fighting people, he has been sparring for years, and like that's why, you know, he was a little nuts doing that. But yeah, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, I think fairly recently. When is the date of this? July 26th. So yeah, fairly recently he became a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, which I think is like still pretty low. Like, I think it's just above white belt, which is the beginner. But anyway, it's important because, you know, he's not going to your local like Brazilian jiu-jitsu place, which is probably a scam. Like, honestly, most of the martial arts places, like I haven't really trained martial arts myself, but I know a bit about this because my dad actually did taekwondo for a long time. a lot of the places basically sell you belts. Like they kind of, you punch a bag a few times, like maybe you do some push-ups, like maybe it's a good place to kind of work out and get a little fit. But as far as learning how to fight, there's really not a lot of good gyms that are even out there in the first place. So you got to understand that if you're someone who just doesn't know anything about martial arts, if you're a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're going to be able to really mess up someone who does not know how to fight at all. Even if that person's bigger than you, like you're going to be able to do things to that person where like from a third party perspective, like a third person perspective, their eyes are going to be all wide like, what the hell are you doing to me? Like I know how to do rear naked chokeholds. That's like kind of the only submission type move that I know how to do. And it's kind of crazy because once you lock it in like good, there's really only a few seconds that person has to try to get out of it before, they got to tap or they're going to pass out. So him as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt, I'm sure he can do that. He can probably also do like arm bars and leg locks, like any limb. If you allow him to have one of your limbs, the Zuck, he's going to do terrible things to it. He's going to cause unimaginable pain for you. So yeah, him fighting Elon Musk fighting him and actually winning, it's not going to happen, man. There's no way, okay? Let's see. So Zuck is in way better shape. He's more than 10 years younger than Elon. He trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he trains Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the best people in the world, okay? You got to remember, this guy is a 100 billionaire. He doesn't, even if there is a legit Jits gym in your city, like, and you go there and like you can actually get good training, he's not doing that. He's probably flying in. He's got a Jits gym in several of his houses that he owns like across the United States. I bet you. Like he's got mats, okay? They're getting cleaned on the reg, and he just has the best people in the world come there to him to trade. That's probably what he's doing. Or he's going into the best gyms anywhere in the world. So yeah, I don't think I would want to fight the Zuck, and if you don't know how to fight, it would probably go badly. Or I would say this, if you don't know Jits, or you're not like a whole lot bigger and stronger than him, it's probably going to go badly. So yeah, that was a really bad move by Elon, and it seems like he's kind of backed off from it because he started, just sort of joking. He's like, I've got this. Well, okay, so here's the thing. After he challenged him to the cage match, after Elon Musk challenged the Zuck to the cage match, he just responds back. The Zuck's like, yeah, you let me know the place. And Elon's like, yeah, we could do it in the Vegas Octagon, and I have this great move that I call the Walrus, where I just lie on top of my opponent and do nothing, which that's probably what he's going to do. The recent photos I've seen of Elon Musk, he's not looking in the most tip-top shape. I mean, maybe Elon could be secretly training. That's probably what he would be doing, because here's the thing, right? I think one thing about Elon is he really wants to be cool, right? As far as all of the big tech CEOs go, he probably is one of the cooler ones, right? Because nobody really, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg really has a fan base. The CEO of Google, okay, CEOs of any of these other companies, I don't think really have fan bases. But Elon Musk has a fan base, so he wants to maintain that. That's one of his edges over these other guys. Challenging someone to a fight and then backing down does not make you look cool. So what I would probably do if I was Mark Zuckerberg is I would try to lean into this, right? Because think about it. Now, what is it? Spez, whoever the Reddit CEO is, he's the most hated guy. It's no longer the Zuck. So now you can kind of start trying to take coolness points away from Elon to try to make you become the new cool guy. And maybe he could pull it off. Like maybe the Zuck could change his image from, being from skinny Jewish kid that invented Facebook, like what was it? The anti-social guy that invented social media, or at least modern social media. He goes from that to the lizard man to the fighter that picks on Elon Musk and other big tech CEOs. Like, he should just go around challenging these guys to fights. And he's like, if you lose, I take your company. That could be how he actually ends up taking over the world through literally fighting people. So Elon's got to try and, I guess, kind of defend his coolness from the Zuck. He doesn't want to get dethroned. And another, I guess, kind of cool guy thing that Elon Musk has been doing is he rebranded Twitter to X. Like now it's just called X. Now here's the thing. Okay, I'll kind of play devil's advocate for him a little bit here with this rebranding, because it's not quite as crazy as some people might think. Because, you know, if you look at the history of X, Elon Musk founded X.com back in 1999 as an online bank, which he sold to what later became PayPal. Or I think he was like bought out or like kind of kicked out of the company later on. And I think part of the reason was over the branding. Like he wanted to call it X, and they're like, no, that's a stupid name. Anyway, Elon Musk bought X.com back from PayPal in like 2017. And they didn't say, I don't think it's been made public how much money he paid for it, but I bet you it was a whole lot of money. Because here's the thing, for those of you that like don't really know about domains and the prices of domains, if you want to get a common word like dogs.com or dog.com, that's going to be a really, really expensive domain, because it's one of those domains where people will just visit it randomly. Like kids that, you know, I did that when I was a kid. Like you type in like cat.com, dog.com, like all these random one syllable words. That's actually how I found my first porn site. I typed in like, what was it? Butt with 2 T's.com. And that was like, probably still is a porn site, but like what definitely was back in, I think like the early 2000s or something like that. But yeah, single word, you know, single syllable word.com domains, common words, those are worth a whole lot of money. And single letter domains are worth even more. Like the latest kind of public record sale that there was for a one letter domain was z.com, which sold for $6.8 million back in 2014. And again, the same kind of value is still there for single letter domains, but in a way, I think it's a little bit harder to pull off. Like, for example, one of the ones that I think was pretty good was Overstock. I mean, I don't know how Overstock is really doing as a company, but as far as like domain and branding, when they got O.co back in like the early, I'm trying to remember when was that? I want to say it was like around 2005, maybe? It feels like it was a while ago that Overstock had all of these commercials about O.co. I remember being a kid watching them. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. They got a one-letter website name, because I don't think I had known about any like single-letter website names. But you know, it works because it's like Overstock, and their symbol was like a big O. You know, their logos and stuff like that were a big O, at least as far as what I remember as a kid from memories that are more than 10 years old. God, time flies. But anyway, I think that branding kind of works. Or like American Airlines, for example, AA.com is their, you know, that's their domain that they own. You go to AA.com, it's American Airlines. Or I think even American Airlines might redirect to AA.com. But anyway, that makes sense. Like that brand, that's on brand for them. But this X stuff, it's like, what does X have to do with Twitter? You know, because Twitter is a well-established brand. It's a well-established domain. Like, and it kind of goes back to the single syllable word domains. Like if you have dog.com and you buy that and you offer some kind of dog service, there's going to be you're going to get a lot of organic traffic from just bored people going to dog.com. Here's what's going to happen, right? This is going to be a literal percentage of your traffic. Somebody is sitting there bored at their computer, or more likely with a phone, and their dog is near them, and they look at the dog and they're like, oh, I wonder what's on dog.com. And so they type that into their phone, and if it takes them to an actual website that's got some dog stuff to sell, some of those people sitting on the couch bored with their phones are going to buy stuff from your site. That's a whole other domain of traffic that most companies are not able to tap into because they don't got those really awesome domains like that. X? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, being a kid. Like, I feel like X was something that was really cool when I was a kid. I don't know if it was just, like, maybe it was just culturally cool, like, kind of or not early 90s, like, late 90s and early 2000s. People's gamer tags and, like, names online and stuff like that would always be, like, XX. Like, it always had a bunch of X's in it that, I don't know. If there was a username you wanted and you didn't want to try to come up with a unique username, X was the go-to letter to buff it out and I guess use that username but still have it be kind of cool. And I guess in a way it is kind of on brand for Elon Musk because, well, of course, he had X.com for what, like 24 years now. He's got SpaceX, right? Like his space company has an X in it. Tesla Model X, that's I think one of the better models of the Tesla. And his youngest kid, whose like name is a bunch of symbols and numbers and stuff, his name starts with an X. So X, I guess in a way, is Elon Musk's brand. But man, I don't know if it was really smart to change Twitter to X. And like now he's trying to say that it's no longer called a tweet, it's now called a zeet. Like that's whack. Okay, I think we could agree that zeets are whack, or they're definitely way whacker than tweets. It's just something that he, thought of. Okay, that's one of those things where he took a big hit off of a Joe Rogan blunt. He's like, all right, it's called a zeet. He's probably also smoking a Joe Rogan blunt when he challenged Zuck to a fight, but it's kind of silly. Here's what I'll say: in order for it to work, in order for the whole like X.com thing to work, it has to become something different. And that actually is Elon Musk's grand plan for Twitter. Okay, he wants Twitter, or excuse me, X, to become an everything app. Now, there are some examples of everything apps out there. The most popular is probably WeChat. So this is an app that's really popular in China. It's, I guess, primarily a messaging app, but it's also used as social media. I guess like sort of a TikTok clone type thing, or maybe pre-TikTok type deal. I don't really know, but it's social media. It's a messaging app, and you can pay for stuff through it. Like through, I guess the payment is technically handled through Alipay, but that's like integrated into WeChat. And in China, you can use Alipay to pay for like subways, and you can also use it to get taxis, I'm pretty sure. So it's like, it's a PayPal plus social media plus messaging plus Uber plus whatever the app is for like your local subway or not taxi, local subway or bus schedule. So that's pretty much what Elon Musk wants to do with X. In fact, he literally said that he wants X to be Twitter plus Substack plus YouTube plus WeChat plus PayPal plus Amazon plus TikTok plus Badoo. So he's basically trying to do what it seems like Mark Zuckerberg is trying to do by taking over social media, by just taking over everything. He's like, no. I'm gonna be everything. I'm gonna do video better than YouTube, or live streaming better than Twitch. I know he didn't necessarily say Twitch. Well, he said Amazon, who owns Twitch, so I guess technically he did. I'm gonna do e-commerce better than Amazon. I'm gonna do which, look, hey, I do e-commerce, so you know what? I get it, man. Yeah, we're both competing with Amazon. Although he's richer than Jeff Bezos, so I guess he can more realistically compete with with Amazon than I can. But we'll see. We'll see if who puts Amazon out of business first. Will it be X.com or will it be based.win? My money's on based.win. But seriously, the the problem with doing this is if you try to do everything. I think this is literally like a Confucius quote or a Sun Tzu quote. If you try to be great at everything, you're gonna end up being mediocre at everything. Like, really, dude, just try to specialize on one thing. But I mean, I don't know. It seems like he's sort of good. Like Elon Musk is sort of good at running a bunch of different companies that do different things. So maybe if anyone can make the everything app, it's Elon Musk. But I gotta tell you, man, an everything app sounds spooky as hell to me because that's even more centralized than the current big tech model that we've got. Okay, like let's go over this again, right? So he wants to be Twitter, Substack, YouTube, PayPal, Amazon, TikTok, WeChat. Those are all different companies. Those are all, they're all big tech, but at least they're different big techs, right? At least they're all under different umbrellas. And maybe it's easier to coax one of them into doing the right thing. But I don't know. A lot of people seem to trust Elon the most out of all of the other big tech CEOs. But see, when you tell me that you want to do the everything app and you want to literally put a chip in people's brains, that makes me not trust you. That stuff right there, it's too cyberpunk dystopian for me, man. But before Elon can really get this whole X thing going, he's probably going to have to win a few legal battles. And one of those legal battles is probably going to be with his old friend Mark Zuckerberg, because Meta actually trademarked an X logo back in 2019. So, it might be tough, right? Because he's already made X his logo. It doesn't look like the Meta logo, like the Meta X logo, kind of just looks like a open and close HTML tag or I guess a greater than and less than sign. Yeah, that's what it looks like, because it's like two different colors and stuff. And the X logo for X.com, formerly Twitter, don't want to dead name it too much, is like, I don't know, it kind of looks like the Xorg logo, right? So that's the other thing too. There's so many other brands and products that compete for X. Like, I feel like almost everything has a Model X or some kind of X brand. Microsoft owns Xbox. There's so many different X things that are out there. So this is going to be a hard brand to build, man. I mean, look, it's going to be interesting if he could pull it off, if he could actually build a big brand and have that one-letter domain. It's going to be impressive, but it's going to be a tough road ahead for X, especially on the part where he tries to turn X into a payment app, because the Federal Reserve just announced its new system for instant payments, the FedNow service. So let me give you guys a little bit of background for those of you that don't live in the US, because I think people in Europe already have basically FedNow. So here in the US, for the longest time, money transfers were not instant, and they still aren't instant. Like, this is a brand new thing that only a few banks are doing. So like, if I try to send you some money through the bank, or when I go to use my debit card, whenever I'm buying something or I'm paying a bill, that money doesn't actually transfer instantly. It usually takes a few days, which is where payment systems like PayPal and Venmo typically came into play, because if you need to really pay for something, like if you want to pay for something online and you want someone to ship it to you, you probably want that to happen quickly, and they're probably not going to ship it to you until they really have the money in their account. So yeah, like those transfers from PayPal and Venmo and stuff like that are instant. Okay, the use of payment apps altogether across the board is probably going to decrease in the United States in the coming years as more banks and more money companies just start using the Fed app for fiat transfers. And of course, this brings up the question of cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrencies were also partially a solution to the problem of quick money transfers. They're all pretty much faster than sending money through the bank using the traditional system, because most cryptos don't take several days. And some cryptos are almost as fast as PayPal's. But also, the United States has been working on their own central bank digital currency, or CBDC, which some other countries have already announced. Like China's got the digital yuan. I think India has either announced or they're very close to launching their own digital currency, centralized digital currency. And apparently, the FedNow service is not currently integrated with a CBDC. It's still just regular old fiat money under the hood. It's numbers on some banker guy's server, right? Trust it. But it probably is eventually going to be plugged into the United States' CBDC whenever that comes out. And for the record, I don't think that CBDC, any CBDCs, but not even the United States CBDC, is going to kill cryptocurrency. It might be a little bit harmful to some of the stable coins. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really thought about that too much. Like I know I've talked about BUSD before, how it's kind of ironic that because it's run by Binance, which is a Chinese company, that they're like better at maintaining the dollar than the actual US government is, at least in the crypto space. That would be funny if the CBDC launches and Binance still manages to like be the more popular stablecoin compared to them, or DAI or one of the other ones. But what the CBDC might do is it might take a little bit of hype out of the, cryptocurrency fields. Because here's the thing, there's some people, I know it doesn't make sense, but there's some people who are into cryptocurrency who would be totally fine with a CBDC. Like they're not, anti-Federal Reserve. They're not anti, none of that stuff. They're just like, yeah, I like the coin. Or they like money, right? A lot of people are trading their crypto in to just make money, like just get in there temporarily, make a little bit of money, and then get out. I think that's most of what the crypto space is, really. So yeah, I think it's going to take a lot of that hype out of the field, and the pipe dreams of any current cryptocurrency being adopted as the official crypto of the US is going to be abandoned. Because I think that's kind of the main cope for Bitcoin right now. Like they think that it's going to be kind of a back end thing plugged into banks or plugged into the CBDC. And maybe it will be, who knows, but I doubt it. Because I don't think the US government controls Bitcoin enough for them to really want to do that. Like if they do, the CBDC is going to be essentially digital fiat. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait to look at the white papers and actually look at the code behind it, assuming that it's going to be something that's open source and something that can at least be run in a decentralized way. Again, probably not, because then the US government isn't going to control it, right? I think that's pretty obvious that the CBDC, just like all the other ones that have come out so far, is going to be a lot more centralized than Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, or any of the other cryptocurrencies that most of us use. So the real question is going to be, is the CBDC more centralized than debit cards? Because obviously those are issued through your bank, who can shut you down. Your debit card can be shut down. And typically, your bank will partner with Visa, who owns the actual payment network. And of course, the government can have the bank freeze your account. So there's sort of like three different people at play that could potentially shut you down. But is that better than the feds just being able to freeze your account directly or take money out of your account directly without a bank authorizing it because you're using a CBDC? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's something that once it comes out, we're going to have to think about, whether it's better to put money in the bank or money in the CBDC. I guess if the government eventually starts outlawing cash, you'd have to start using the CBDC, or there wouldn't be any difference between like money in the bank and the CBDC. But I don't think that that's going to happen right away. The whole outlawing cash thing, that's going to have to get delayed till once people are actually comfortable with the CBDC, because a lot of this stuff, you got to remember, it's a slow boil. Okay, you can't raise the temperature of that heat too fast, otherwise the frogs are going to jump out. Oh, and speaking of governments slow boiling people, let's talk about Iran for a little bit. I've had Iran on my mind for the past couple of weeks. Not really because of the geopolitical activity there. That's like maybe 1% of the reason, and a lot of that stuff is boring. Well, one of it's kind of hilarious, but most of it's boring. It's mostly because of the fact that I was in a local grocery store a few weeks ago. Not a Walmart or a Walgreens, but not a farmer's market either, but still one of those places owned by like a-hole Delhaize or whatever, one of the other parent companies that basically owns all the grocery stores. But anyway, on the intercom thing where they were playing music, they were playing the song Bomb Iran by Vince Vance and the Valiants. Now, to give you guys some historical context about this song, it came out during the time of the Iran hostage crisis at the beginning of the 80s, where dozens of Americans were being held hostage by angry Iranian students with weapons, like, kind of militarized Iranian students. And this story was dominating the news cycle at the time. You got to remember, this is in the early 80s, before like really anyone has the internet or online news, certainly before online news, and there's only a handful of TV channels. So everyone knew about this crisis at the time. Like, this is what everyone's paying attention to. So what do? If you're a band, well, of course, you write a diss track against Iran. And I gotta be honest with you, I think it's a good song, okay? I think it's really catchy. It kind of reminds me of the Dead Kennedys' Kill the Poor song or Led Zeppelin's Gallows Pole, in the sense that all of those songs, they have a really upbeat feel to them, right? Like if you're someone who didn't speak English or understand English and you heard those, you'd probably be like, yeah, this is the great dancing music. But, it's Kill the Poor is what, about like just killing all the poor people with a neutron bomb so rich people have more space to play around and have fun, and like, you increase the property value and stuff like that. Led Zeppelin's Gallows Pole is a hangman gets money from one of his brothers and gets to bang his sister, and then he's offering all this stuff to the hangman to try to let him go, but then he goes ahead and hangs him anyway, just after he got done banging his sister. He's like, man, let me tell you, that was some good puss. Like, man, I'm glad your sister ran down here and gave me some puss to try to let you go, but anyway, I'm gonna hang you now. And then just laughs at you as you're fucking choking to death, or I don't know, after you snap your neck, whatever happens after the hangman hangs you. So I don't know. I guess I like songs that have that weird thing going on where the like tune or the instrumental is upbeat, but the lyrics are kind of morbid. But I think most woke people would consider the song Bomb Iran to be racist or Islamophobic or both. You'll probably never hear that song in like Cambridge, Massachusetts, like certainly not playing on the intercom of a grocery store. People would lose their freaking minds there, man. That's just, I don't know, that's just another interesting difference between living in New England and living in Dixie. But anyway, let's talk about some Iranian technology. Okay, this was pretty hilarious. So, an admiral for Iran, which actually I got to go on this brief tangent for a moment, because when I first heard about this, I realized that I'm really dumb when it comes to geography, because when I first heard about the Iranian admiral, admiral is a rank in the Navy, right? So when I first started reading about that, I was like, wait, Iran has a Navy? Because when I think of Iran, you think of like deserts and stuff, and I guess there is a lot of deserts and mountains there, but I thought they were landlocked. I was, dumb American was, I guess, mixing up Iraq with Iran. I'm pretty sure Iraq is mostly landlocked. So yeah, dumb American did not realize that Iran borders, like, what is that, the Persian Gulf and some other Gulf, and then it goes out into the Arabian Sea, and then I think to the north it borders the Caspian Sea. So yeah, definitely not landlocked, and it totally makes sense for Iran to have a navy. But what doesn't make a whole lot of sense is them calling this new computer that their admiral unveiled that was supposed to, I guess, help the Navy with like identifying ships, or, you know, it's supposed to be used for some kind of like defensive combat or possibly even offensive combat operations. Um, what doesn't make sense is their Navy presenting this, or I guess the media presenting it, as a quantum computer, when in reality, it's a like mid-grade single board computer that you can buy off of Amazon. I think Linus recently made a video talking about it where, you know, it's like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, or maybe not even as high end as a Raspberry Pi. The specifications of this thing is it's got an ARM based processor, a what is it? An ARM Cortex A9 processor, dual core, you guys. And it has 512 megabytes. That's not a giga, megabytes of DDR3 RAM. So yeah, like it's it's a low end SBC. Okay, it's not even mid range. I looked up the specs. It's a low end SBC, but definitely, absolutely not a quantum computer. Not even close to a quantum computer. But you know what? If and when Iran gets itself a quantum computer, they're gonna be so happy, because here's the thing: quantum computers can be used to break asymmetric encryption, okay, like public-private key pair encryption, because they're able to run this thing called Shor's algorithm very efficiently, okay? Now, I'm not going to sit here and even try to explain Shor's algorithm to you, because I'm not that kind of a math guy, but I'm sure you can look it up, or, you know, I'm sure you can watch a video that explains to you how, like, quantum computers break encryption. It doesn't break symmetric encryption, though. What I've heard people say is for things like AES, right? That's a symmetric encryption algorithm. It sort of cuts the effectiveness of it in half. So a 256-bit AES encrypted file is, you know, if you're trying to brute force it with a quantum computer, would be more like a 128-bit. I don't know if they necessarily are running Shor's algorithm against it or if it's a different algorithm, but that's just how I've heard it explained. But still, 128-bit AES encryption is pretty solid. Now, I don't know if it is always a consistent halving, or if, you know, there's some other, like if it always reduces it by 50%, but if it does, then AES 128 might be a bit of a problem, because I don't think 64 bits of AES encryption is enough. I don't really feel like doing the math, trying to do the math right now, but that seems like something that could definitely be broken within your lifetime. 64 bits of encryption, probably not good enough. But anyway, most communications that are being sent over the web are using asymmetric encryption. Like SSL, probably the most fundamental encryption that's used on the web these days, partially uses asymmetric encryption. Most other encryption protocols, again, used for communications, are either entirely using or partially using asymmetric encryption. Now, of course, that's not the only thing that you can do with a quantum computer. Like recently, IBM were working with a 127 qubit Eagle quantum processor to model the spin dynamics of a material to predict properties such as how it responds to magnetic fields. So yeah, they're able to do some kind of actual science with it instead of just breaking encryption and, you know, using that to look at people's communications. But I feel like that's something that Iran would definitely want to do. I feel like that's like the first, second, and third thing they're going to want to do is break some people's comms or decrypt some people's comms with their quantum computer. Because, you know, I explained this in the last video, but most of your data that is sent over the internet is stored, even though it's encrypted. Okay, that's the whole idea of store now, decrypt later, is we've got enough hard drives, or we've got enough money for hard drives to store data, or certainly data on interesting individuals. Because if you think about, you know, how these communications on the internet are working, right? So at a high level, you have Alice, who is trying to talk to Bob. Alice has an IP address, and we could figure out Alice's IP address pretty easily if she's not taking any steps to mask it, because all the government has to do is go ask the ISP who had this IP address at this particular time that, this communication that we're interested in happened. The ISPs keep record of that, and they can do the same thing with Bob to get Bob's IP address. So now we know Alice and Bob are communicating, but we just don't know what the body of their communications are. If you think of it like an email, we don't know what the body of their emails are. We don't know what the subjects are either. We just have these encrypted bits of text. And sometimes we might be able to infer a little bit, like maybe we can try to infer if it's just text, or if they're sending a file by, how much encrypted content is being transferred and how quickly it's being transferred and things like that. But we don't really know what's inside of it. Okay, so we'll just store it. We have plenty of hard drive space, right? The government is not short on hard drive space. So they'll just store it away until eventually they do have quantum computers, and then they can see that, what your conversation is about. Was it about blowing up buildings in Minecraft, or, blowing up buildings in Minecraft? So right now, Iran's go-to move for shutting down comms or definitely stifling comms of dissenters is to just basically shut down the whole internet to keep people from communicating in the first place, or to keep people from reporting things to the outside. But obviously, this makes people, especially young people, who are the ones who are going to do most of the protesting anyway, even angrier. And it probably disrupts commerce and all kinds of other legitimate internet uses that would actually benefit Iran quite a bit. So yeah, turning off the internet is kind of a shot in Iran's foot whenever they do it, but if they can just decrypt specific people's communications to find the dissenters and then they can kill them without turning off the internet, then the rest of the public might not get as mad because they can still use YouTube or whatever isn't blocked in Iran that they do for fun. Well, apparently over there, a lot of people are using VPNs and just getting around stuff anyway. So yeah, they could still look at YouTube as long as the internet's not turned off if they use a decent VPN. And there's not a VPN ad for you. I bet you thought there was, but that is not this kind of podcast. So anyway, there's a lot of protesting and dissent going on in Iran right now over this hijab thing. And look, I am sure that Mossad and the CIA are assisting the dissenters and helping them to destabilize Iran, because that's what you do. That's what you do when there's some crazy shit going on in a country or a country that, you're enemies with. Your enemies are going to come and they're going to try to fuel that fire to keep it burning as long and as hot as possible so that they can try to burn you up with it. Okay, so yeah, obviously if there's protest, just like I'm sure people do here, when we have our peaceful, or what do they call it, fiery but mostly peaceful protest here, and I think it's even been there's been like some of it traced to George Soros and stuff like that, where there's outside influences giving money to dissenters in the US, protesters, whatever you want to call them, and literally adding fuel to the fire. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit of glowing happening among some of these protesters. Now, the most recent hijab crackdown by the Iranian government was shutting down DJ Kala, I think is how it's pronounced, Digikala, something like that. Basically, it's their version of Amazon. And the reason that they did that was the company posted some pictures of women online without hijabs on. Big no-no in Iran. And apparently the protesting and the enforcement of the hijabs, it died down a bit in Iran because it was really going off the rails. Like last year when they killed that girl, or this girl died suspiciously in police custody, because of course the official statement from the Iranian government is always like, oh, I don't know, she hit her head, or I don't know, she fell on a boot and her neck hit the boot. And nothing suspicious happened. She just tripped and fell, neck hit a boot. The end. So yeah, nothing official happened though. Like the protest kind of died down as the enforcement died down. No laws were changed, but for a while, I guess the police were just sort of looking the other way, right? It was one of these deals where we're trying to sort of keep the peace. So okay, we'll let you take the hijabs off a little bit. Okay, no advanced thoughterry, but you can take the hijabs off. Maybe they were treating it like jaywalking or something like that. So yeah, this new enforcement of it looks like Iran is coming back with a real force. They've got their morality police doing their regular patrols again, so I guess we're going to see how this turns out. Probably more protests that may or may not receive assistance from the enemies of Iran. I would love to be a fly on the wall in Iran's strategy room just to hear how they're going to deal with this, because in a way they're really they're between a rock and a hard place. Okay, because when I try to see it from Iran's perspective, they don't like the West. They don't want us corrupting them and their women with our feminism and our gay stuff, so they're trying to maintain this culture and this religion, since Iran's an Islamic theocracy, of course. They want to keep it as far away as possible from the slippery slope of Western degeneracy. That's what I really think they think. And I don't know if they're entirely wrong. I mean, in their minds, playing devil's advocate for Iran here, right? If they let women take off their hijabs, it's only a matter of time until the skirts get shorter, the shirts start revealing more and more boobage, and then before you know it, the girls are practicing their ahigao faces at age 15 on TikTok for millions of views, and they might even be working for Chuck already, at age 15. I mean, at that age, they're probably working for him off the books, doing shows on the dark web, and you got to pay with Bitcoin, and it's a whole thing. But yeah, they don't want their women, they don't want their culture going down that route that the West has gone down. And again, I don't know if I can entirely blame them for this. I think maybe there's a better approach to be had than literally throwing people in jail and killing them for not wearing a head garment or a headscarf. But I don't think that that's the most effective way to maintain the culture, because clearly some people don't want to participate in that. Okay, clearly some women living in Iran don't want to wear the hijab, or maybe they don't even want to wear the specific one. That's another thing I've heard, that it's not even just as simple as a binary, wear the hijab or don't wear the hijab. I think there's very specific specifications for hijabs that they want them to abide by, and I especially think that forcing people into the whole modesty and sexual conservatism thing especially tends to backfire at times. Not all the time, but if you force people to follow that tradition, the rebellion oftentimes goes off into the extremes. I know we've all heard about girls from those small conservative towns, or maybe they went to a Catholic school or something like that when they were kids, and then now that they're adults, going off to a college in the big cities at frat parties. They work for Chuck, okay, is what I'm trying to say. But they do it for free. Those girls, oftentimes, they're not charging money. They don't know what the big city prices are like. Yeah, they're working for Chuck for free. Oh, while we're on the subject of Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia has been constructing this so-called smart city called The Line. Okay, I mean, it's in really, really early development right now, but apparently so far they have cut this, or I guess not cut, but they've kind of excavated this really, really large line through part of the country. They're calling it let me see how big this is. 100 kilometers, roughly, or actually, no, it's longer than that. It looks like it's about 150 kilometers. Because it's at an angle. I mean, maybe it's a little bit longer than that, actually. But yeah, so it's I mean, it's a lot. It's a pretty impressive feat just so far. I mean, as far as cutting this line goes, I guess. But yeah, there's gonna be a lot. It's gonna take a lot to actually build this thing. So it's a giant so-called smart city, right? Because it's gonna have all this AI stuff added to it to, you know, make it, I guess, more comfortable to live there, supposedly. And it's pretty much in the middle of the desert. Like it, you know, it's a really isolated place just from looking at this drone footage that shows the long excavated line. Reading off of its Wikipedia page, it says that the line is planned to be 170 kilometers. So yeah, pretty long. And it's supposed to preserve 95% of the nature within Neom or Neom. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's like the I guess more official name for it, or maybe that's the name that the region already has. I'm not entirely sure about that, but yeah, it says it's supposed to stretch from the Red Sea to approximately the city of Tabuk, not sure. And here's the part that blows my mind a bit. It's intended that it's going to have 9 million residents living within this 110. I don't think it says how wide it is, but it doesn't look very okay. So the total area, it says, is 34 square kilometers. So 9 million people living within 34 square kilometers or 13 square miles. That's really small. That makes me feel like claustrophobic. And it's saying that the average population density would be 260,000 people per square kilometer. That's so many people. Like, okay, so it again says in the Wikipedia, by comparison, Manila, the world's most densely populated city in 2020, it had a density of 44,000 people per square kilometer. So it's more than 5 times as dense. That would drive me nuts, dude. Being around that many people, like, I don't even like going in grocery stores when it's crowded because I feel like part of it is I feel like everybody's in the way. I feel like obviously there's people that are in my way, especially in grocery stores, because no one like pays attention, like puts their carts in crappy places. But then I get self-conscious too, because I'm like, oh, I'm in the way of other people, because I know how annoying it is to me, and I don't really want to inflict that annoyance upon others. So imagine the grocery stores in frickin' it's gotta be delivered. They gotta have food delivered to you, man. It's gotta be like illegal to go to the grocery store. You've gotta be, I don't know, a licensed grocery shopper or something. Someone that knows how to go in there and get stuff without crowding it and just being a pain in the ass for everyone else. Like there's so many things that it would just be way too crowded. So the line's plan consists of 2 mirrored buildings with an outdoor space in between. So that's kind of that's part of the reason why it's going to be so densely like it's realistically going to be even denser than that, because it's like, so on the sides it sounds like you're going to have pods basically, right? The line's plan consists of 2 mirrored buildings with an outdoor space in between, having a total width of 200 meters and a total height of 500 meters. Plan is for the city to be powered off of renewable energy. It'll consist of 3 layers, one on the surface for pedestrians, one underground for infrastructure, and another underground for transportation. Well, I mean, at least they're separating, like, because that's the other thing I was thinking of, is like vehicle congestion, especially in Saudi, because gas is wicked cheap, and, you know, rich people in Saudi, and this sounds like it's going to be an expensive city too. Like, it doesn't, you know, it sounds like this is supposed to be maybe not necessarily a luxury city, but definitely like a middle class, upper middle class city. that people are going to stay in. I don't think there's going to be a lot of broke people, a lot of poor people. Definitely not like by Saudi standards poor living in Neom or the Line or whatever they're going to call it. Yeah, that's going to be really crowded. Those two buildings that are supposed to house 9 million people. Gosh. And yeah, powered by renewable energy. We'll see about that one. It's so tempting when there's all that oil right there to just power it by oil. Why not, man? Why not? Why spend all that money on renewable energy when you're just sitting atop all that oil? And artificial intelligence is going to monitor the city, and it's going to use predictive and data models to find ways to improve daily life for its citizens. Good God. How about not keeping them in cages, man? They're gonna be cooped up. I feel like that's so small, like such a small amount of space. Now here's the other part that's interesting too, is the cost of this thing. So the estimated building cost is 100 to 200 billion, right? US dollars, with some estimates as high as $1 trillion. Now, I'm not like, I don't know a lot about building, like definitely not stuff like this. My most recent construction project has been a chicken tractor. So let's just say that my building projects are much smaller scale, but I have a strong feeling in my gut that the building of this and these estimates are going to be way off of the actual price. I think it's going to be way more expensive, like maybe 2 trillion or more. Because it kind of reminds me of the, what was it? The Berlin Brandenburg Airport. I'm pretty sure this was the one where it was the opposite of Trump's slogan, where he's like, what is it? Under budget and ahead of schedule. This was way over budget. It took way longer than they originally thought to build. Like, let me try to go over the history of this briefly for you guys that don't know about it. All right, so back in 2009, the construction cost for this airport in Germany was budgeted at 2.83 billion euros. But then as they actually started building this thing, they realized that their estimates were way off. And so by late 2012, like just 3 years into the building of this airport, the expenditures had already totaled 4.3 billion euros. So 3 years in, they're already at double the initial estimate to build this place. Then over the next few years, it looks like there was all this back and forth with, I guess, them trying to get more, the company that was building it, trying to get more money. And I think eventually it says that they got a loan. Yeah, the EU permitted an additional 2.2 billion on the 3rd of August, 2016. And then a 2.4 billion loan was signed later. So I guess they just increased the initial one. Doesn't look like that's two different ones. So let's see. Okay, so it looks like it actually ended up, the spending actually ended up being another like 3.2 billion. So it looks like here, until 2020, the total cost of the airport will top 6.5 billion. Okay. It looks like the final cost came to a total of 10.3 billion. Like it starts to get a little bit hard to follow as far as like what is the total cost of everything versus like what the value of the building is and stuff like that. But basically the point is this is something that the Germans were building, which you would think that they're pretty efficient at building stuff like this, and it ended up costing them like 4 times as much as what it was initially budgeted as. So yeah, I think that this could easily end up, like, if they're trying to say that they're trying to say that the estimated building cost is 100 to 200 billion. So maybe they are bringing that into account with the $1 trillion estimate, since that's like 5 times as much. I don't know, man. I feel like it might be even more expensive than that. Like it's one thing that it definitely is causing, like the construction of this is they talk about all this renewable energy and not disturbing the environment and stuff like that. But they have been disturbing some of the local people that live there. So there's these nomadic people. I think it's called the Howitat tribe that resided in this area, like in the kind of mountainous desert region where they're building Neom. And the Saudi security forces have basically been killing a lot of these guys and imprisoning them. And there's even been threats sent to journalists in England that have been, well, basically publishing this stuff, making reports about it so it's heard in the rest of the world, because obviously that stuff gets squashed by the press, and that's actually in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, they've been receiving death threats by people that are thought to be affiliated with the Saudi government. So what I think is going to end up happening with this Lion City, I mean, if it ever does end up being built, I think the cost of it, I mean, the total cost is going to be a lot bloodier, a lot more human life, a lot more impact on the environment, because I'm really skeptical about that whole powered by renewable energy thing. Because there's another thing too, is that oftentimes there ends up being a lot of dirty cost associated with renewable energy. Building new windmills or building new solar panels and things like that. I guess solar would probably be the most effective in that area. So yeah, it's probably going to be have a lot more cost to the environment, and also I think it's going to have a lot higher monetary costs. I really think it could end up being the first like multi-trillion-dollar construction project. And speaking of things that are worth multiple trillions of dollars, let's take a look at some news from the multi-trillion-dollar company Apple. Maybe they'll end up loaning the Saudis some money for their line project, if they end up using all Apple technology. That's definitely one way to get the cost up past $1 trillion, right? Could you imagine having millions of iPads put into the wall of, well, not millions of iPads in every household, but I guess millions of iPads in total, right? To have one on the wall of every household and build like an Apple smart home into every apartment and put a super Siri in charge of the entire city. Thing is, the Saudis got to make sure that they update those iPads, because they could still get critical security flaws. I think actually the security flaws that we're going to talk about, the one that affected recent models were iPads, because let's see. So there's security content for iOS 15.7.7 and iPadOS 15.7.7. So yeah, these are the old ones where there was a vulnerability where an app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. So this is effectively root privileges. Like, this is the highest level of privileges that you can have on an iPad. Okay, so that's very bad, where they're able to execute arbitrary code. Pretty much the highest, one of the most severe CVEs that you can have. But this other one, so this is being tracked as CVE 2023 32434. This one here, okay, so this actually, same CVE actually does affect the newer iPads as well. So this is iOS 16.5.1 and iPadOS 16.5.1. And it says it affects iPhone 8 and later. So, maybe it does really affect the rest of the iPhones. I was thinking that it was just for older models, but for the iPad, it says it affects all models of the iPad Pros. So those are the newer ones. iPad Air 3rd generation and later, and iPad 5th generation and later, iPad Mini 5th generation later. Okay, so, okay. It does actually affect the newer iOS and iPadOS devices. you guys might want to make sure those are updated if you own the Apple devices. If you're watching this on an Apple device, might want to make sure it's updated because same thing. This was an integer overflow, which ultimately resulted in an app being able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. It's not every day that you see this, but hey, it does happen to Apple. You know, it's proof that even their locked down walled garden that some people think is a more secure model, sometimes it can be penetrated and it can have kernel vulnerabilities. Now, another thing that Apple has been working on is an internal AI chatbot. This hasn't been released to the public yet, but I think, a lot of people, and I think the same thing, that eventually they might release something like this, probably a nerfed version of it to the public. Now, a few months ago, Apple, Google, and several other companies banned the use of ChatGPT by their employees. And the reason for this is they wanted to stop data leaks, because when you're prompting things on ChatGPT, like when you're sending information to them, that data is stored by them by default. So they have access to whatever prompts you're sending them. And if you're sending them things, like, you got to think, if you're using ChatGPT to help you write a new app internally or a new feature for one of your apps internally that the source code isn't supposed to be published for, and ChatGPT is literally giving you pieces of that source code, well, now they have part of the source code to your app. Same thing when you're feeding it into them, like if you're trying to debug, because they have both the inputs that you are, like the prompts that you're putting into the large language models, and they also have the data of the replies. And so this is a way that companies like ChatGPT could basically mine a whole lot of other companies' intellectual property. So that's the whole reason why Apple went and developed Apple GPT as that internal GPT for their employees to give them feedback on things and, help them with all the same things that the ChatGPT large language model does. Now, Apple hasn't actually officially confirmed or denied Apple GPT, but I'm sure that they probably will in the coming months or possibly years, however long it takes them to kind of polish it and at least announce it as some kind of feature for people. And that would actually be something kind of interesting to use, these GPTs to try them out. Although, again, since it's Apple, it's going to be absolutely proprietary. So I don't know. Maybe it's not something that I want to own long term. Maybe I'll try it on somebody else's phone, because I have tried like Siri and I've tried some of the features on iPhones, especially when I was working at Geek Squad, because we had to do functionality checks of these, and we also had to do functionality checks after we would repair these for people. So yeah, like I was a little bit more in touch with some of the newer features of iPhones and iPads at that time, but I still didn't own them myself because I don't like running proprietary software, and also I don't like the lightning cable thing. I feel like that's a scam, although the EU did manage to step in and pretty much get Apple to concede on that. One thing that I might use it for would be debugging software, because I have played with some large language models that are able to write code. Like there's one that you can use where you basically prompt it and it'll create a Rust function for you. You can't really use it to create a whole program. It literally just does one function at a time, but that's kind of interesting. Like I've been playing with that as a part of my journey for learning Rust. So maybe some AI that's built into the compiler to better help you with debugging, because the Rust compiler already is pretty good, like especially compared to like a C or C++ compiler for debugging software. So yeah, I guess an AI compiler would kind of be like the Rust compiler on steroids. Here's a feature on Apple's devices that you can use right now, though, at least as long as you have iOS 17. A new feature that lets your phone decode warning symbols and just various icons and symbols on your car's dashboard. Like if you didn't know where the AC or the defrost is in your car, this could probably help you out with that. And honestly, I think overall this is a pretty useful feature. I know a lot of people have been saying online that people should just look up what these various icons do in their car's manual. And sure, you can do that, but the whole point of this, the whole point of really just technology in general, a lot of the time is convenience, okay? So if this thing works, I mean, I don't have an iPhone or anything to try it out myself with, but if this thing works like the translate feature that's on Google Camera, because I have used that before, or whatever the app is, I think this is built into a couple different apps now, where basically you can point your phone at text that's in a foreign language, and in a couple of seconds, it can translate it to English for you. So if this is that fast as far as like decoding, you know, what symbols do, or like it is able to automatically recognize the symbol and then take you to the web page and tell you what that does, then I think that's great. I mean, if it works like that and you've got decently fast internet, then this is probably going to be a lot faster than people looking it up in the manual. So that's the whole point. Like the only people who really get to feel smug about this and get to criticize it and not be hypocrites would be people who already know what the warning lights and the various buttons and knobs on your dash do already. Because honestly, most of the warning lights are universal at this point. Like, it doesn't matter what vehicle you're in. So the Zoomer with the iPhone and the Boomer with his car manual, they clearly both lack the vehicular literacy to know what the icons do. And unless you actually are going to spend some time reading that manual, like when one light comes on and you whip the manual out because you didn't know what it meant, and you'd spend that time to educate yourself on all the various lights and symbols, which, depending on how this iPhone thing works, might also work that way if it's bringing up a web page. But anyway, if you're not doing that, then you are no better than the kid with the phone. In fact, you're actually worse, because it takes you 10 times longer to put on your dumb glasses and look in your dumb book. So I think this is actually a pretty base feature that Apple has added in. But something they're doing that is not base, it's quite the opposite actually, is they're having a trademark war with Swiss fruit growers. Okay, so apparently, right, just like how there's going to be this trademark war going on with X, there's a trademark war over this, like, Apple logo. So on the right, we've got the Swiss Apple grower logo, and then on the left we've got the, like, Apple, you know, this is the old one from, gosh, I don't know, like 10 iterations ago or something, of the rainbow, you know, LGBT colored Apple logo. So yeah, this now here's the thing, this fruit company is 111 years old, or it's an 1,100-year-old fruit farming association. Apple's new. Apple's nowhere near that old. How are they able to bully these guys away from their logo, who, in my opinion, they don't even really look the same? I mean, I don't know how you would mess these up. I don't think Apple's logo has ever been red, for one, so that's a clear difference. Also, they're different kinds of apples, like, clearly. I mean, I'm not that up to date on my Apple brand or Apple types, but the Apple is supposed to be a Macintosh, right? So the Apple logo is a Macintosh, and this one for the Swiss growers almost kind of looks more like a Red Delicious, maybe? Like, it seems like the bottom base is smaller. So yeah, it uses this logo, which is, for those of you just listening, looks like kind of like a Red Delicious apple with a cross in the upper right-hand corner within the apple. So yeah, it's a red apple with a white cross for Switzerland. Doesn't really look a whole lot like the Apple company logo. So yeah, Apple, the company, with all this money that they have, they're basically fighting a legal war of attrition against this this like farming union, because they obviously don't have anywhere near as much money as Apple does to tie up in legal battles and pay for lawyers and stuff. So while Apple is fighting this logo war in Switzerland, they're going to end up fighting a two-front war, the other front being in Japan, of all places, over their App Store. So Japan has said that they want to create their own cross-platform app store, so for both Google and Apple devices, or Android and Apple devices rather. They want to have their own just app store for, I guess, Japan on both of those platforms. So for Google, this is probably a little bit more straightforward to do because you're able to sideload applications on Android devices. You're able to install F-Droid or the Aurora store on like pretty much any Android device, as far as I know. It doesn't require root, I know that for sure. So there's not really anything like locked down that stops you. I don't even think you need to have developer mode on to do it. Maybe. It's been a while since I've had to set up a new Android phone, but I'm pretty sure you just have to tick the box to allow installation from third-party sources, and boom, you can have an alternative app store on Android. But Apple absolutely does not allow this on their devices. You can't sideload apps, at least not normally. Maybe if you jailbreak it, you can do it. I know like way back in the day, I had a jailbroken, was it iPod 4, I think? Like back in 2011. So yeah, jailbroken iPod 4. And I was able to load, I think it was called like Cydia on it, and you could basically get like pirated apps installed to your iPod 4. You know, pretty cool. Definitely pretty cool when you're a high schooler that doesn't have money for apps like, what was it, like Angry Birds, I think was one that I pirated and put on there. But yeah, this is going to be interesting if, you know, Japan is able to bully Apple into kind of opening up their platform a bit more, kind of like how the EU was able to tell Apple, like, you will make the phone USB-C. You will comply. And they did, right? And now, one of the other new things that the EU has gotten Apple, and actually this is something that applies to pretty much all phone manufacturers, is the battery change, right? Where you have to be able to replace the battery on your own using simple tools. Okay, so it can't be some nonsense where the phone is like glued together and you have to use like a heat gun or you have to use some other fancy thing to kind of melt that adhesive basically and separate the two backs of the phones. And you know, you can look up a phone repair video to see how it's done. It's a whole thing. It requires a bunch of tools. So yeah, if it's to the point where you can replace it in the field, I mean, that's really what I'm hoping we get, is something where you can easily pop the back off of a phone, maybe even use a screwdriver to undo a screw, pop the back off of a phone, pop your battery out like we used to be able to do with the old Androids, and then put a new one in, and then that way you can get probably a multi-day, like maybe even a multi-week battery life if you're going to end up carrying several other batteries with you. That's what I'm hoping we get, and I hope that Japan's economy, or I guess the iPhone and iOS market in Japan, is big enough to get Apple to actually do this with their platform. I mean, it's going to end up being that the governments of the world just force Apple to finally make a based product. Because I've said this multiple times, that if iPhones are USB-C, if they have open source operating systems that you're able to mod, just like if it was the same as a Pixel phone, where you can not only modify Android, of course, and install apps from third parties, but you can install your own custom ROM on it and still relock the bootloader. If iPhones were like that, they would be the better phone, hands down, because they've got better hardware for the most part. Like, maybe there's some things that, like, a Samsung camera, or maybe like one of Sony's phones, because they like really put a lot of effort into their cameras. There might be certain shots where the Android device is better, but for the most part, camera is better. Screens are typically better. Again, maybe Samsung's is better, but and anyone else besides Samsung isn't going to have a better like display than an iPhone's display. Just everything about them, like, you know, I've held iPhones in my hand, and it even feels like generally like a slightly more premium device than high-end Android phones, except for maybe a Samsung phone again. So if it's open source, you know, if all the things that really give it an edge, and even Samsung's, they don't let you mod them, so that's you know, they're kind of on par there. So if they just made it to the point where you can have, I guess, third-party app repositories, third-party app stores, then that one alone would pretty much put it on par. I mean, I guess Samsung's are technically still more open source than iOS is, but it's still a mix for Samsung. Like a lot of the Samsung bloatware that's installed on top of Android that you can't uninstall, and you really can't uninstall it because you can't root the devices, or at least not without like sometimes there's some people who come up with proprietary methods for rooting these proprietary phones, but then you got to pay them like $50 per phone or something like that to do it. So for the most part, these newer Samsung devices, you just can't root or can't ROM them unless there's been some new changes that I don't know about. So yeah, if you have access to third-party repos, then iPhones would pretty much be the same as Samsung phones. And I guess it might even be the obvious choice over a Samsung phone. I mean, what else would a Samsung device have? I guess there's DeX, the whole thing where you can plug it in and sort of use your phone as like a desktop. Like you could plug it into a screen. So plug it into a screen and plug it into a mouse and keyboard. So that's your peripherals. And then go ahead and use it as a computer. I haven't actually tried that out. I know of some companies that tried it. Like I used to work for a company that supported the telecom for waste management, and I know that the employees there at Waste Management like to use that DeX feature because we had to make sure that our software worked for it. But yeah, other than them, I can't think of any other like companies or anyone that's really using it on a large scale off the top of my head. I guess the stylus would be the main thing that still gives Samsung an edge over iOS, or at least iPhones, because they don't have that. But then you can just get the iPad, you know? Because if you're going to have open source app stores, then that's also going to apply to iPadOS as well, because I'm pretty sure that they're using the same app store as iOS. So yeah, I think if the phone is not going to be a definitive winner, then I think the tablet would be, because iPads also blow Samsung's tablets out of the water, and generally Samsung's tablets are the best Android tablets that are available. So yeah, Japan might actually make the iPad to finally be an overall better tablet than the Samsung tablet. So I really hope that Japan is successful with this pressure that they're putting on Apple. Now, let's take a look at some data breach news. So Microsoft recently had a Layer 7 distributed denial of service attack on some of their various technologies. Like they had it on the Azure, Outlook, and OneDrive were the primary things that were targeted. Beginning in June 2023, Microsoft identified surges in traffic against some services that temporarily impacted availability. Microsoft promptly opened an investigation. It subsequently began tracking ongoing DDoS activity by a threat actor that Microsoft tracks as Storm 1359. And these attacks likely rely on access to multiple virtual private servers in conjunction with rented cloud infrastructure, open proxies, and of course they're running various DDoS tools on these devices they're using. And they're saying that they've seen no evidence that consumer data has been accessed or compromised. There's just been, of course, outages of Azure and OneDrive and Outlook. So let's take a look at the technical details of this. So, of course, it was a Layer 7 DDoS attack primarily. And they were using things like HTTP flood attacks. So The idea with that is you create a high load of SSL and TLS handshakes, and each one of those have to be computed. I mean, depending on what the underlying web server technology you're using, it might put each one of those on a thread. Most likely it's going to be on a virtual thread, so it kind of lets you have thousands and thousands running at once. I mean, that's definitely what something like Microsoft is going to be using. Really, they're going to be able to have the infrastructure to normally support millions of legitimate requests at a time. But obviously, this is potentially doubling or tripling that with illegitimate requests, which eventually is going to start booting out those legitimate ones, causing the backend servers to run out of CPU and memory to actually be able to process those legitimate ones. Another kind that they were using was a cache bypass, where the attackers are trying to bypass the CDN layer, so all of these cached resources on their Microsoft's content delivery network. They're trying to bypass that in order to actually force the backend servers to load more of their contents instead of it being loaded from, well, from the CDN. And of course, they were also using the classic slow loris DDoS attack. So this is where you open up a connection to a web server and then you request something, like it could be an image or maybe it's a sound file, and you fail to acknowledge that it downloaded, or you will say much later on that it downloaded. So basically, it's the same kind of thing, and part of the reason that this particular like slow loris attack is so popular is because it mimics legitimate web traffic. So when I'm out here at my farm and I'm trying to download an image, like for example, that image that may or may not make it into the video version of the podcast, of the line, right, of Neom or whatever they're calling that construction project in Saudi Arabia. That image was about 20 megs, like the full, resolution of the drone footage. And that took about a minute to download on my farm internet. My farm internet's really, really slow. Maybe about like 30 seconds to download. So if I'm requesting resources from a site, it's going to be a much slower download than someone who's living in the city. Definitely a lot slower than my internet connection I had in the city. Man, I miss my gigabit fiber. But yeah, it's still a legitimate request though. So, what do you do as the person who's running a site or running some type of web app? Do you just say, oh, we're not going to accept these? Because that connection has to stay open the whole time that I'm downloading this resource. So, it puts more strain on your web server if there's a bunch of people with slow connections trying to download various resources. And so that's where slow loris comes into play. You just make it look like a whole bunch of sneeters on satellite farm internet are interested in your site, and it makes things go really, really slowly because you're keeping all those channels, all those connections open for a lot longer than they need to be. So Microsoft was eventually able to mitigate this attack that was being done by Storm 1359, which, as we know from Microsoft's new naming convention, Storm 1315, or Storm rather, is a code name for a hacker group that's relatively new to the scene, a more amateur hacker group. Now, so far, there is one group that has taken responsibility for this DDoS attack as well as other attacks, recent attacks against Microsoft, and that is Anonymous Sudan. Okay, they're the ones who are saying that they did the DDoS, and they're also claiming responsibility for this data leak that allegedly came from Microsoft containing 30 million customer accounts. Now, I don't really think that this particular data leak is legit, which is also part of the reason why you got to take, Anonymous Sudan claiming responsibility for this huge DDoS attack with a bit of a grain of sand, right? Because this data leak that they had turned out to be a fake. So they were posting it in their Telegram, saying that They wanted interested parties to pay $50,000 in Bitcoin for the full database, which, like I said, would have been 30 million Microsoft, like hacked Microsoft customer accounts. And the post included a sample of the data that they were offering up that was allegedly stolen from Microsoft as proof. But it was a really, really small sample. So they provided 100 credential pairs out of 30 million. Okay, that's really tiny. And people were looking through these 100 credential pairs, hackers and people who download these databases, security professionals, etc., and they were comparing them to other databases that have leaked over the years. And they found that, well, for one, a lot of the credentials origins could not be verified. Like, nobody has come out and been like, oh yeah, that was my email and that was my password for some Microsoft service, Xbox or whatever. I mean, there's a whole bunch. So far, no one's come out and done that, and some people have even come out and said that they found that same credential in older database leaks. Now, that doesn't automatically rule it out because, of course, most people that are out there that have no real knowledge about being secure online are using the same passwords. So it's not that unlikely that the same password, or possibly even the same password hash, depending on how things are being stored, would show up in the same database as well as the same email address. I mean, that's going to be even more common. But yeah, so far everyone who has looked at this is pretty much saying that it's fake, and I'm also thinking it's fake, mainly because of the fact that the sample they offered up was so small, okay? Like, if you legitimately have 30 million credentials, then giving people like 100,000 or even 10,000 is pretty easy. But trying to fake 10,000 credentials and make it seem legit, that's very, very difficult. So that's why I think that they probably just created a fake, and maybe some of the entries were even high quality fakes. But again, like I said, some people are claiming that they've found that they just copy pasted these from some older databases. So faking databases is definitely one way to quickly ruin your reputation in the hacker community, the database leak, breach, whatever community. That's like the one thing that really gets these guys upset, is when you fake your database leaks and you say that you have data that you very obviously don't. And it could even ruin it for other Sudanese hacker groups, because, I don't know, Anonymous Sudan is the only hacker group from that region I can think of. I mean, presumably they'd be from that region since they're using that name. So yeah, you're going to earn yourself a bad name as a hacker man group. But one group that's probably earning themselves a good name so far, at least with some impressive hits, is the Clop ransomware gang. So this is supposed to be a Russian-linked, state actor, state-affiliated Russian hacker gang, ransomware gang, that managed to hit a few federal agencies with their MOVEit breach. So this was a exploit that was being taken advantage of in the MOVEit file transfer software. So this is like enterprise grade file transfer software. It basically has a bunch of extra fancy stuff built on top of FTP and SFTP, like automation services, analytics, and stuff like that. So on May 31st of this year, Progress reported an SQL injection vulnerability in MOVEit Transfer and MOVEit Cloud, and this was being tracked as CVE 2023 34362. And the vulnerability's use was being widely exploited in late May, but it was potentially being used as early as July 2021. So, yeah, it had been probably exploited for about 2 years until people noticed what was going on, and that's why so many agencies were hit by it. So the May 31st vulnerability that was discovered allowed an attacker to access MOVEit transfers database from its web application without authenticating. So the attacker then might be able to execute SQL commands that alter or delete entries in the database and infer information about the structure and the contents of the database, and also eventually exfiltrate data out of that database. Now, CISA has not officially reported how many agencies were hit, especially not how many federal agencies were hit, but the Department of Energy has come forward so far saying that they were affected by this MOVEit breach, and so have several private companies like the Boston Globe and East Western Bank. But there's about a dozen other federal agencies that have contracts with MOVEit. The Department of the Army, the Department of the Air Force, the Food and Drug Administration, just to name a few. So yeah, they probably exfiltrated a whole lot of data that we're probably going to see used, by Russia, since these are state-affiliated threat actors. And another ongoing hacking attempt that's probably being coordinated by state-affiliated threat actors are these unsolicited smartwatches that are being received by mail. So this is actually a warning from the Department of the Army Criminal Investigation Division. This is on, cid.army.mil, right? Official Department of Defense top-level domain. So, service members across the military have reported receiving smartwatches unsolicited in the mail. These smartwatches, when used, have auto-connected to Wi-Fi and began connecting to cell phones, unprompted, gaining access to a myriad of user data. I should also mention that this was posted to this site on June 15th, 2023. So these smartwatches may also contain malware that would grant the sender access to saved data, including banking information, contacts, and account information such as usernames and passwords. Malware may be present, which accesses both voice and cameras, enabling threat actors to access conversations and accounts tied to smartwatches. And if it can also access cameras and like the microphone, you'd think that they can also use it to listen to you in real time. These products may also be used for brushing. This is the practice of sending products, often counterfeit, unsolicited to seemingly random individuals via mail in order to allow companies to write positive reviews in the receiver's name, allowing them to compete with established products. Oh, interesting. So it seems like it might not even necessarily be state actors. It might be a private sector actor that's trying to leave fake reviews on Amazon or some other e-commerce site. Interesting. So yeah, do not, in all caps, do not turn the device on, report it to your local counterintelligence security manager, or through our Submit a Tip, Report a Crime reporting portal. I wonder how many Army personnel or just military, Department of Defense, whatever personnel that get these actually turn them on and like actually have connected them to Wi-Fi. Because it's some, since they're having this, like report thing, this alert telling them not to do it. So I mean, just imagine you get a free smartwatch and it's like, oh, look at me, I must have won some type of award. You put it on and then it just starts hacking all your stuff, man. That's crazy. But that's that's the new one of those new hacking techniques that are probably not even really that new. I mean, it's basically a rogue device that you're introducing into the mix. It's kind of a lot like dropping off flash drives in a parking lot, if you think about it, and someone's like, ooh, what does this do? Let me stick it into my corporate computer to see what it does, right? Like, I remember reading that online somewhere where someone's like, of course I'm going to put a flash drive into my company computer because I don't want it to break my personal computer. That's like that's the Sigma rule for testing out random flash drives that you find in parking lots. Use them on someone else's computer. so it doesn't destroy your stuff. So yeah, this just looks like the new version of that. Of instead of leaving a flash drive in the parking lot, give them something shinier. Give them a smartwatch. Send it directly to their house, and maybe they'll put it on, and maybe you'll be able to hack them through that smartwatch. Now, there's been another, another sort of not malware attack, but a backdoor that has been discovered that could affect some military personnel. Probably not ones here in the U.S. because I don't think they use these particular radios, but the TETRA, TETRA, police radios had what seems like a deliberately inserted backdoor into the 20-year-old or so encryption algorithms or encryption standards that are used within these radios. So this is something that's used by, it's sold by a bunch of different companies like Motorola, Airbus, and the thing about it, here's the thing about it that's really spooky, is TETRA, like the TETRA standard, is not open source. Okay, so this is encryption and security standards that is just, trust me, bro. Just trust me. All of your information is encrypted, right? But what we see when these researchers were looking into it is they found what they describe as a backdoor in TEA1. So ordinarily, radios using TEA1 would use a key of 80 bits. Yeah, Wetzel's said that the team found a secret reduction step which dramatically lowers the amount of entropy that the initial key offered. So an attacker who followed this step would then be able to decrypt intercepted traffic with just regular consumer-level hardware. You can set up a laptop and maybe an antenna in a promiscuous mode to be able to intercept these communications, receive these communications, and then boom, you can decrypt them and see what people are saying. So yeah, that's pretty insane to trust, to use encryption that's proprietary, to use encryption that's just trust me, bro. Because that's what proprietary software, proprietary anything is trust me, bro. It's totally not spooky, man. I can't let you look at the source code. Even if you're curious, I can't let your buddy look at it, especially not your buddy that knows how to code. He's not allowed to look at the software. You gotta trust me. You gotta just believe that there's nothing spooky going on and that you can go ahead and use this radio for, like, police and emergency services in Europe use it, I'm pretty sure, and there's some military in Africa that use it, the kind of stuff that you would probably want your comms to be encrypted. Just trust me, bro. It's totally encrypted. It's totally not spooky. See, this is why I generally just treat closed source software as if it has backdoors in it by default. But this is going to be double true for any type of encryption. I'm not even going to touch closed source encryption with a 20-foot pole. Now, this next story is still a type of hacking, okay? It's a little bit of an unorthodox type of hacking because it's not necessarily a computer that's getting hacked, but it is a vulnerability in cars that is getting exploited all across the country. They call them the Kia Boys. And it's this trend that's kind of started on social media, like it's real popular on TikTok, that's what all the kids are using, where I think initially it started as the Kia Challenge. So let me give you the background for this. Apparently, Kias and Hyundais, and I think there's a couple other models of cars, like makes and models of vehicles, are very, very easy to steal, okay? Because that's what these kids are doing. They're stealing these Kias, and they're stealing these Hyundais. And I say kids, like, I think the average age of people that they're catching doing this is like 14 or 15, or at least some of them, like several of them, are that young, 14, 15, like too young to drive, but they're going for a ride in these Kias. And there was even a documentary, like a little short 15-minute documentary posted to YouTube where somebody was interviewing some of these guys. I mean, they seemed like they're kids in high school, 15, 16. stealing these cars and just going for rides in them, wrecking them. There's even been some fatal crashes. Like it's crazy, man, what these kids are doing with these cars. And they're so easy to take. So here's the thing, right? Here's the I guess how you do the Kia challenge, but don't actually do this at home. So all you got to do is, well, first you got to get in the car, right? So you either break a window, or maybe it's unlocked. Maybe you figure out a way to like jimmy open the lock to the car or something like that. But you got to get in the car first. And then you've got to basically like pry back or like take off all the plastic that's around the steering column. So pry that open with like your hands or maybe a screwdriver or whatever. So then that's going to kind of expose more of like the wires and whatnot. But you don't have to hotwire the car, okay? It's not even that advanced. So all you need is a phone charger. And you got to make sure it's the kind that's got the big end, like the USB-A end. And you insert that into the small metal nub that's beneath the ignition cylinder, and it fits in perfectly, just like a key. And you can twist it to start the car, just like a key. And this is what has resulted in car thefts in various cities spiking up by like 1,000%. Like it's like 10 times higher car thefts in some places. Like it's crazy because these kids are just bored taking these cars on these joyrides. And like I said, it's been a trend for a while. I mean, I think during COVID-19, like 2021 is really when it started picking up, with people going viral doing the Kia challenge. It's even made its way into some rap songs, like popular rap songs. I don't know any off the top of my head. This is what I've heard. People talking about Kia boys and stealing Kias, stealing Hyundais as well. If we take a look at this, the data about these thieves, so this is just tracking Kia thefts, Kia and Hyundai thefts in Milwaukee. In 2019, the Milwaukee Police Department reported roughly 3,500 vehicles were stolen, with Kias and Hyundais making up only 6%. But then in 2021, number of stolen cars increased by nearly 200% to 10,500 cars stolen in total. Of those, 67% were Kias or Hyundais. So yeah, the number of Kias and Hyundais stolen specifically increased by more than 3,000% in 2 years. Like, holy crap, do not buy these cars. This neighborhood already ranks 6 for the most Milwaukee car crashes in, they said the majority of these Milwaukee car thefts have been happening in the Kilbourne town / Weston neighborhood, where around 1,000 vehicles were stolen. Can you imagine 3 cars per day getting stolen in your day? That's insane. And again, the way that these kids drive in them, because to them, it's literally like Grand Theft Auto. You just get a car and you just drive it however you want, because like it's not connected to you in any way. And like if you go in there with gloves and stuff and like you manage to not leave behind any DNA, it's like it's just go for a ride. Just go for a fun ride, like tear through the streets. They go really fast, like 80 miles an hour down roads. Like in the little documentary that's on YouTube, they have one where this kid in a I think it's a red Hyundai driving down, like tearing down the street, and then he does like an e-brake drift onto somebody's lawn and like just barely misses a fire hydrant. Like they're driving real reckless, and they've hit people. They've done it's been crazy, man. And in August 2022, Chicago officials reported an 800% increase in Kia and Hyundai thefts compared to the previous year. If you live in the hood and you have a Kia or a Hyundai, you're asking for it to get stolen. You gotta, like, I don't know, you gotta come up with some like, I don't know, put a boot on your car or something, man. You got to come up with some way to secure that thing because it's going to get stolen. Some nephew's going to get in your car and take it for a ride. And it's already resulted in some pretty big class action lawsuits. Like, there was a $200 million settlement that was reached in New York City. New York City versus Kia and Hyundai for them causing a public nuisance with these with these kids, these mostly black teenagers, stealing these cars and just tearing through the streets like a bunch of knuckleheads, man. Oh my god, it's crazy. Yeah, yeah, that lawsuit was just settled in May of 2023. So, I mean, they're gonna have to fix it in the newer models of the vehicles. I'm sure they are, but I don't know. There might need to be a recall on because you know the other thing you think about too is like if you're living in the hood, you probably own a Kia or a Hyundai, right? You probably own some, relatively cheap vehicle that's really easy to steal and really likely to get stolen because you live in a high crime neighborhood. Yeah. God, that might be the worst vulnerability of the past couple of years, just in terms of like sheer, because it's one thing to get your account hacked. It's one thing to get your email hacked or your social media hacked or whatever, but to get your car hacked and someone wrecks it, man, that sucks. The Kia Boys might honestly be one of the more notorious hacking groups, like, loosely. They're not really affiliated with one another. It's just these gangs that get together and start stealing cars and like making social media like TikTok posts about it and stuff in different cities. They might honestly be one of the worst hacking groups, most dangerous and destructive hacking groups to come out over the past few years. So next we've got this is kind of a messed up one. This might be even more messed up than the Kia Boys, just in terms of I guess the immorality of it. So this startup company called Cerebral. It's like a kind of a mental health startup company, one of those places that you're supposed to go to online to be able to talk to somebody and maybe get some counseling, get some help with mental health. It's a real problem. It revealed that it has shared the private health information of their clients, including mental health assessments, of more than 3.1 million patients in the United States with advertisers and social media giants like Facebook, Google, and TikTok. Wow. So imagine this. Okay, imagine you have some mental health issues that might be exacerbated by social media companies, right? Because I don't think social media is generally good for people's mental health. Like, I know one thing that's kind of an analogy that some people make about content creators is that we sell our mental health, right? And I think that's especially true for the people that really care about what their fans think. Like, there's some content creators who they've kind of had their, I guess, fan bases turn against them and things like that, and that can be something that's really harsh. I mean, I don't know. I think you guys like me for the most part, so it's good that my fan base is not an impact on my mental health. But you can imagine that for a lot of people out there, social media is not good for them. Okay, especially teenagers, right? Teenagers and people who have their beauty standards corrupted by social media. That's another really common thing that's messing with the mental health of our youths. So you seek some help, and you seek a company like Cerebral to help you with this. And then they turn around and stab you in the back by selling your data, selling your assessments, selling some of your most private information back to the same companies that exacerbated your issues in the first place. So this telehealth startup exploded in popularity during the COVID-19 pandemic because, of course, it's an online service. So, when everything was locked down, we all kind of started using these online, if you needed any type of doctor, any type of medical intervention, you probably first saw an online doctor. Okay, that was a new thing, doing like, I don't know, screenings, I guess, checkups, medical checkups over Zoom. That was like part of the new normal that they were giving us during COVID-19. So they became really, really popular. And they said that they were collecting and sharing the names, phone numbers, and email addresses, date of birth, IP addresses, and just everything. They're sharing just about everything um, that they were collecting from you in the first place with these various social media companies. So the full disclosure says, if an individual created a Cerebral account, the information disclosed may have included name, phone number, email address, date of birth, IP address, Cerebral client ID number, and other demographics or information. If in addition to creating a Cerebral account, an individual also completed any portion of Cerebral's online mental health self-assessment, the information disclosed may also have included the service the individual selected, assessment responses, and contain associated health information. In addition to creating a Cerebral account and completing Cerebral's online mental health self-assessment, an individual also purchased a subscription plan from Cerebral. The information disclosed may also have included subscription plan type, appointment dates, and online booking information, treatment and other clinical information, health, insurance, pharmacy benefit information, for example, plan name and a group number, and insurance copay amount. So yeah, this seems like it's sort of like if you go to a therapist and you know how they have that non-disclosure thing. They're not supposed to disclose what you say in therapy sessions to anybody unless you're like, hey, I'm gonna go fucking murder somebody. That's the only exception. And imagine that. So you're going to a therapist and then they turn around, they're like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna call up the Zuck. I'm gonna call up the Chinese and sell all of your data to them, like everything basically short of a recording of your therapy session. But oh yeah, I'm going to tell them the gist of like what support plans you talked about and what information you submitted in your self-assessment, and yeah, I'm going to let all these guys know exactly what is wrong with you. That way, when your addiction eventually brings you back to social media, they're going to know how to exploit you and torture you even more. Even worse than what was happening before. You thought your beauty standards were messed up before? Well, get a load of these AI-generated broads. That's right, you can never compete with them because they're created with computers. Now, if we take a look at the official notice of HIPAA privacy breach that was posted on Cerebral.com, because of course this is a HIPAA breach, they're saying that, like many other industries, including health systems, traditional brick and mortar stores, Cerebral has used what are called pixels. Remember those Facebook tracking, or not Facebook, Meta tracking pixels now? Such as those made available by Google, Meta, Facebook, TikTok, and other third parties. They ended up using those pixels in their technology since the beginning of their operation. So they're kind of like, whoops, guys. Sorry, we didn't read the manual, guys. Okay, it happens to the best of us. We didn't realize that using these tracking pixels from companies that make their money off of mining people's data on our mental health assessment apps and our online health apps would result in them being able to mine all of your data. We're sorry, guys. We didn't realize what was happening. So they said that they immediately disabled all of those tracking pixels from their platform after they read the manual and figured out what they actually did. And they're saying that they're not aware of any misuse of PHI arising from this incident. However, individuals can prevent, well, they tell you how you can try to prevent the tracking of your data or being tracked on the internet in the future. Here's one thing you can do. Don't ever use Cerebral. Don't ever use them. And they have this phone number for more information. Contact 1-800-785-8435 toll free to ask them, why the hell did you give Meta and TikTok and every other social media company my mental health information that I tried to disclose to you in private? Yeah, this is probably going to hurt people's trust with these online healthcare platforms. There should probably be some legal action against this company for this, though, because this is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know. To me, maybe the whole like mental health thing is just kind of a sensitive topic for me, but this is just really messed up to have a, whether accidental or not, it definitely doesn't seem like it was accidental, because how do you not read the freaking manual on Meta's tracking pixels? Seems like somebody should be held legally accountable for this instead of just having a little PDF posted on their website saying, I'm sorry. Now, Amazon is having some action taken against them by the FTC for their practice of enrolling customers in Amazon Prime without their consent, and also sabotaging their attempts to cancel their Amazon Prime memberships. So the FTC, it's taking action against Amazon for, basically they're saying that they duped millions of people into unknowingly enrolling in Amazon Prime using these manipulative tactics that they're calling dark patterns to trick consumers into enrolling in the automatically renewing Prime subscriptions. And Amazon purposefully complicated the cancellation process for Prime subscribers who sought to end their memberships. And they're saying that the primary purpose of the Prime cancellation process was to enable subscribers to, not to enable subscribers to cancel, but to stop them from canceling. And Amazon leadership slowed or rejected changes that would have made it easier for users to cancel Prime, because those changes adversely affected Amazon's bottom line. I mean, Amazon Prime is one of their primary moneymakers. So yeah, they would try to trick people into just signing up for this. What is it? I think $14.99 a month or something like that is for Prime. So trick you into signing up for it in ways where you might not even necessarily need Prime, and then they make it really complicated for you to cancel it. And so now the FTC is readying their lawsuit that they're going to be bringing against Amazon in the US courts. And I think their goal is to actually just break Amazon up. They're trying to say that they're finalizing this as part of an antitrust lawsuit. Like, this is just one of many aspects of their antitrust lawsuit to eventually try to break up the company of Amazon. And if you think about it, there's a lot that they control. I mean, with AWS, there's a very large percentage of the internet that is basically under Amazon's control. I mean, it's Amazon's boxes that are powering a large percentage of the internet. They're the largest e-commerce business, and also they're, with owning Twitch, they're also a really large media company, and also I think Jeff Bezos personally owns the Washington Post. I don't know if it's technically Amazon that owns that, but yeah, I mean, you think about big tech companies, Amazon is definitely one of them that really seems like they've got their tentacles in a lot more pies, and maybe deeper into the pies than a lot of the other big tech companies. So how do you guys think that lawsuit's going to go? Do you think that the FTC is actually going to be able to get Amazon broken up into several different companies? Or do you think that Amazon is just going to pull the same move like all the other big tech companies do, and be able to somehow stay together through some type of corporate reorganizing, or just pinky promising not to meddle in certain industries anymore? Let me know in the comments below. But this is it for the Libre Podcast, Episode 3. Have a great night, and adios.